Those of you who may not know me, I am Bonnie Jean Feldkamp. I'm a syndicated columnist, and I used to be the opinion editor for the Gannett-owned Louisville Courier Journal, which is part of the USA Today network. So I have worked on both sides of the desk, so to speak, and I continue to work on both sides of the desk as both an editor and a columnist who writes a column once a week. And so what I am going to walk you through today is all the things I know for sure and also some of the inside scoops on what I learned working in the industry and what that means for contributors. And we're going to start with what is an op-ed. An op-ed and how does it differ from letters to the editor? So op-eds are 500 to 800 words typically. Letters to the editor are under 200 words. And an op-ed, a lot of people think stands for opinion editorial, but it actually stands for opposite the editorial page for where it physically appeared in the newspaper. And it was coined in 1970 by the New York Times. And the New York Times decided that instead of just having staff columnists, what they wanted was a way for community members to be involved. And let's be honest, if they publish what community members are writing, they sell more newspapers. Because if I write an op-ed or I write a letter to the editor and it gets published, I'm going to buy it. My mom's going to buy it. My neighbor's going to buy it. And it just is smart marketing and community engagement for that publication as a business. Now, interestingly enough, the New York Times discontinued that in 2020 at the 50-year mark, and now everything is called an essay, a guest essay, which is perfect because that's exactly what we're writing. We are writing an essay. We are writing an opinion essay. And that is the main way that you need to think about what you're writing. And letters to the editor are only 200 words or fewer. They typically are reactions to something in the news or something that has happened in your community. And they are printed as a collection in the newspaper, and also they're published as a roundup online. And what you'll see if you go to your newspaper, they'll either say letters with a colon if you're online or readers with a colon. You know that these are reader responses. So that's a letter to the editor. An op-ed is more detailed. It has data, it has support, and it gives more of that reported essay feeling. What I write once a week, I would consider to be close to an op-ed, but I'm a columnist because I'm not staff, but a paid columnist. So that's just classified different, but it's essentially the same thing. Okay. All right. Why am I not? There we go. Who can write op-eds? I was not advancing for me. Who can write op-eds? Anyone can write op-eds. You see a lot of PR people, a lot of politicians, a lot of experts writing op-eds because they know how to use the media and they are media savvy. Advocacy groups, things like that, they will write op-eds because they know how to use them. Anyone can write an op-ed. I helped a student this summer complete an op-ed that the Courier Journal published. I don't work there anymore. I did not contact anyone. I don't know the current opinion editor. I have never met her. I just know how to write an op-ed. So he had taken this exact workshop at the library last year when I held it at the Louisville has this thing called the How To Fest where you can just teach people how to do anything. And I did how to write an op-ed. And he came to that at the library. He reached out to me as a high school senior in May and said, I want to write this. Will you look at it? I said, yes. Sat down with him in June via Zoom. We went over edits. He submitted it and it got published a couple of weeks ago. It's excellent. He's a student, and if a student, and I published many students when I was the opinion editor, so I don't want you to be any way, shape, or form intimidated by the op-ed process. Anyone can write them. What it comes down to is, do you have a strong opinion and are you able to communicate that within the parameters of an op-ed, which is what we're going to go over. What are op-eds good for? They're good for promoting your books or research if you are an academic or an author, advocating for a cause, law, or policy. That falls into your camp, Kathy, I know. And establishing your expertise in the community. If you are a professional in the community or someone who just knows a lot about something, this is a great way to establish yourself as an expert in your community. And that can be your local community or that can be your area of interest community. Also, holding power to account. Holding power to account is one of the big things that we use op-eds for. We consider it our public square. We consider it where we can really put out in public our opinions about what's going on in our community. And I know that your elected officials read the opinion section of the newspaper. I know this because I have every time I wrote something about uh, or I published something that was about one of our elected officials. I'll take Mitch McConnell, for example. The majority of the time, would write a response. And as an opinion editor, my responsibility to fairness, and I cannot speak for every opinion editor, but most in the Gannett realm, I know, and Gannett is the largest owner of newspapers, there is an expectation for fairness to the point where you reach out to the opposing view, or if a public official is being written about, you say, hey, I have this op-ed that's publishing tomorrow. You don't let them read it, but you say, hey, I have this op-ed publishing tomorrow. Let me know if you want to write a response. And then that way they are able to address whatever that is. I will not get caught in the back and forth where now this person gets to come back and say, well, I said it's not an online tit for tat, but it is. You get to say your piece, and whoever has the opposing view will also get to say their piece within the realm of fact. So holding power to account is powerful. The other thing that happened is Rand Paul, actually, this is one of my favorite stories. I published a piece that was critical of him, and he didn't like it so much that he refused to answer the question at a press conference from the Courier Journal politics reporter because I had published that op-ed. So I know they read it. So it's great for you to call your congressman. It's great for you to say, hey, this is how I feel. And they write it down and they note down what their constituents feel. But this is public facing. And this is a way to reach your elected officials in a way that you cannot do otherwise. I do want a word of caution. If you are an academic, an author, an expert, this is not for self-promotional purposes. This is to underscore your expertise and offer it as a service to the public. This is where a lot of PR people get it wrong. I get press releases all the time. I just got one last week. Toy Story 5 is out right now, and there's a voice actor on there that I got a press release for that said, hey, they're doing this movie, and would you like to interview them? And I had to respond and say, well, what's the story? A person is not a story. A person is not reason enough. They're looking for promotion, and that's not a story. I need to know what that story is. It can be about something that person did, a struggle they went through, a policy they're trying to see through and why it matters to them, but a person is not a story. So that's really important to keep in mind if you want to use writing op-eds as a way to establish your expertise. That's great, but save the self-promotional stuff for your bio at the end and really focus on the issue at hand. That will really exemplify what you're doing. Now that I've said all that, I'm going to run you through the basic format that I use. Not this is doesn't have to be every single one, but an op-ed format it goes like this. You open with your strong opinion. That first sentence, first paragraph needs to be your strong opinion. You need to not only hook the reader, but hook the editor that is looking at it because you know that readers have a short attention span. Then you hook that reader with a narrative. your narrative. I really like to use anecdotes and narratives because people will connect with that more deeply. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. After you have your strong opinion, your narrative, which basically tells the person why it matters to you. This is how I feel. This is why it matters to me and why I feel this way personally. Then you can digress into your data, your statistics, and all of those things. And then you can bring it home again by wrapping it up and saying, again, this is why it matters to me because this happened in my family. This happened to me personally, or I have witnessed this as an employee or as an advocate, and then you solidify your point, bring it home. Some advocates like to end with a call to action. You can, but it is not mandatory that you end with a call to action. Sometimes the call to action can sound sales pitchy, but also it is nice if you are inspiring the reader to do something to make the community better, that you give them something that they can, something tangible they can do and why that matters. So we're going to start with the opening with a strong opinion, what you want to think about when you're looking at the idea to write is answer this question. What is the purpose of your commentary? Why are you writing this? And I ask myself this question every week. Especially if I get lost, if I'm telling a story and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm lost. Okay, what is the purpose? What is the point I am trying to make? And you should be able to boil that down to one sentence. What are you trying to get across? And and that's the big thing. And when you're looking for, actually, I'm going to save that for later. We're not going to talk about that right now. But the purpose of your commentary, one thing it can't be is it cannot just be to belittle or if you're angry, that's fine. You need to get that out to your spouse, your best friend, your journal, however you need to do that. But an op-ed is not the place to just rant or screed. And now you're going to say, oh, I read them all the time. Yes, you do. They're not effective. The reason why I want to hold this workshop is because we are writing to make a difference. We are not writing to just rant. We are writing to make a difference. And this is my dogma right here. I say it in my TED Talk. I say it over and over again every time I teach a workshop. Your contempt won't change hearts and minds, but your personal stories might. And they will do that through your op-eds. That's why I say have a strong opinion and have a narrative or an anecdote or something that personally connects you to the hardship or the policy or whatever's happening. It means a lot more to the reader instead of saying, you know, people are going to lose Medicaid and SNAP benefits are disappearing. Yes, you're right. But if you can say, as a kid, I held that free lunch ticket. I know what it's like to walk in the door and know my hot meal is when I go to school. And for that to be gone for our kids breaks my heart because I was that kid. You are going to reach so many more people if you lead with vulnerability and lead with that instead of just anger and contempt. This is what I think of when I think of contempt. This guy wagging his finger, pointing his finger at you, that contemptuous rant. Brene Brown, who is she's a psychologist who studies shame. If you don't know of her, I love her work. She she talks about contempt as meaning that you are better than someone, and shame is the tool of the oppressor, and contempt prompts shame. If you are looking to shame someone, then you're probably missing the mark and you probably have a little bit more inner work to do. You need to move past just discharging that emotion and move towards productive discourse in a way that looks towards a solution. So people will say, well, a little public shame isn't doesn't hurt anyone. For our public officials, maybe that's true. because a lot of times they know what they're doing is wrong, and they know that in the limelight, if they can get away with something, that's their benchmark, not whether or not they're doing right by people. We need to elect better officials if that's the case, which it is the case. So that is one reason why I think op-eds are a much more powerful tool, because if you look at the age of our Congress and our other elected officials, local elected officials don't tend to skew quite as elderly, but some do. They are not, and if you look at the algorithm of social media, newspapers are still one of the only places where you can get your message out there in front of people who would not otherwise read it, because it doesn't rely on an algorithm. Now, the online portions absolutely do, yes, but they rely on the newspaper's algorithm, not your personal algorithm. So when people say, "Well, why do I need to do this?" Because I'm on I'm on Facebook, I'm on X, I'm on whatever, that is why. Because you're in an echo chamber on all of those social media platforms. You are only reaching your circle of people, or the circle of people who agree with you, or the trolls who just want to bring you down. It is not productive discourse. Newspapers are still a space where you can have that public facing opinion in a way that reaches people who make decisions. And that's why it's important. And that's why it's important to really choose your words. I also like to use, I'm from the South, so Jeff Foxworthy was the "you might be a redneck" guy when I was a kid. I don't know if you remember him. You can Google him when we're done if you don't. But he always had this shtick about, if you're XYZ, then you might be a redneck. I have a version of that for op-eds, which is, my version of that for op-eds is, if you are if you are writing like 4 paragraphs on Facebook, you might have an op-ed. If you are 4 tweets and links and all kinds of memes into a threads or an X threads, then you might have an op-ed. So when you do that, I'm not saying don't post it on social media. What I'm saying is, when you get to that point on social media, then you want to hit copy and paste. And think about fleshing that out and articulating that in a more productive way, so you can have a public facing letter to the editor or op-ed that can reach beyond people in your algorithm. This is the line I always go back to. This is my other dogma, I guess, is, you take personal experience and tie it to current events or social issues, and it helps the reader empathize, relate, and care. That is my goal every time I write an op-ed. That is my goal every single time. And it goes back to that beginning of starting, having your strong opinion, and then pulling into your narrative. Because I get a lot of mail. I get a lot of hate mail. I get a lot of atta girl mail. But my favorite mail that I get is the mail that says, "Huh, I never thought of it that way before." Because it doesn't mean that they have to agree with me. It just means that they opened their mind just a little bit, and they were able to at least understand a different point of view. They may say, "Huh, I never thought of it that way before, and here's why I think you're wrong." But they also might say, "I never thought of it that way before. Let me do a little bit more reading. Let me do a little bit more research." You don't know. But if they're able to just say, "I never thought of it that way before," then they'll be able to at least listen. That's the hope. That's my hope, at least. While we're on talking about this, let's take a minute, because we are going into midterm elections. Let's talk about endorsements. Endorsements are a thing that newspapers have really shied away from in recent years. And that is just in signaling the downfall of newspapers and how newspapers have not figured it out yet for themselves. They have not figured it out yet for the industry. So, endorsement, first, let me tell you this, the opinion section, op-eds and opinion essays and letters to the editor in the opinion section is the number one reason people cite that they canceled their newspaper subscription. And it is because media literacy is so bad in this country, people do not understand the difference between news and the opinion section. And now that we are online, where people can just share links to those op-eds, they don't see that the newspaper also ran the opposing view. I got so many angry emails as an editor saying, "How dare you? Why don't you do this, that, and the other and publish the other side?" And I would have to respond and say, "Hey, I'm so sorry you missed it, but here's the opposing view." I started putting the link in between. You'll see like little links that come up in between when you're reading um, the columns, and I started putting read the opposing view and putting the link so people would see that we were, but it didn't matter. So many people don't get past the headline before they decide to be angry about something. So endorsements, newspapers don't typically run those anymore. When I was there, Gannett had put out a no endorsement policy, even for local elections. So when I interviewed our two mayoral candidates, I interviewed them and then wrote, if you believe in this, vote for this guy. If you believe in that, vote for that guy. We did not take a stand. And people read that to mean that we didn't like either candidate. And I'm like, that wasn't necessarily the case. It was just the policy. And it really was unfortunate because our governor, Andy Bashir, would not sit down with an interview with me because it wasn't an endorsement interview. He didn't have that kind of time. He's like, is this an endorsement interview? No, we're gonna talk. And he's like, well, then, and the Herald Leader got that because they endorsed him. And the Herald Leader is a Tribune newspaper, not a Gannett newspaper. But Gannett owns the majority of the newspapers in this country. So, all of that to say, do not write op-eds like they are endorsements. Again, a person is not a column. The policy is. The issue is. You want to write about the issues, you want to write about the policy. Also, as a regular person, you're not going to be able to publish an endorsement because if I publish your endorsement, I gotta publish Joe's endorsement down the street and Nancy's endorsement across town, and then we are just buried in endorsements and we're not talking about anything other than vote for my guy, vote for my gal. And it's not effective. So if you are going to write in a way that you hope that influences elections coming up in these midterms, make it about the policies, make it about the issues, not the candidate. And if you write it in that way, you'll point to the candidate because it becomes very clear which candidates are for what. Okay. All right. Mind your life. What I mean by that is that I don't know if you journal or if you take notes, but when you are reading something online and you feel that visceral reaction that gets a rise out of you about something in the news, I want you to think about why you're so passionate about that. And the fact that it's in a horrific event or somebody did something stupid is not enough. Your lived experiences influence your emotions and they influence how you react to things. You have to be emotionally intelligent enough and intuitive enough to be able to pinpoint the things that happened in your life that make you react in that way. The example I use in my TED Talk again is homelessness, being unhoused. And one of the things that is a huge issue in our country right now is affordable housing. And I talk about how like I read an article in the New York Times about homeless people sleeping on the subway. And in the comment section, Lord help me, the comment section, somebody put, the subway is not a bedroom. Like, all exclamation point. And I'm like, what an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. What I just said is all contempt. That is all knee-jerk reaction, just name calling contempt. And for me to say that gets me nowhere. But I can say, I've never slept on a subway before, but I've slept in my car. I know what it's like to live out of my car. I know what it's like to sleep in other people's cars because I don't have a place to stay. And so instead, I'm able to write about that part of my life of like, that's great that the subway is not a bedroom, but where's someone supposed to go when they don't have a place? So we can judge them for where they are, or we can understand where they've come from and help them know where to go. And that's the difference. That's the big difference. And that's what I mean by mining your life. So when you start discharging emotion in that contemptuous way, really think about why you're getting emotional about it. What in your life has pointed towards that visceral emotion that you can be you can be helpful. I also want to talk about holding authority to account. And we all are children of someone, and many of us are parents. But as children of someone at some point in our life, we have all screwed up to the point where an adult has stood over us and screamed. That was stupid. What the hell were you thinking? You could have gotten yourself killed. You could have, and any of those things that a loving parent at their wits' end and terrified just unloads on that child. You may have done it yourself as a parent or a mentor. But as the child on the receiving end of that, that did not, and then we were grounded. For me, I was grounded in my room. I had to write sentences. Whatever the punishment was, that's not accountability. True accountability is kind. And I mean kind in the way that loves you enough to be hard on you, that loves you enough to sit down and say, you're really screwed up. You messed up bad, kid. But you know what? We got to figure out how we're going to get through this, and I'm going to get through it with you. So let's talk about where it went wrong, and let's talk about how we get it back on the right course. You're going to have consequences, but I'm here for you. That's the kind of accountability our community deserves. And we can hold our public officials accountable, but we can do so in a way that remembers our love of community, our love of country, and that we can get through this together. And that's what I think of when I think of accountability. Speaking of our local public officials, local really, really matters. It does. It does. We are all caught up in DC national drama. What our president's doing, what our Congress is doing. But you have to remember your Congress is there locally in your community. So when we want to go off on DC drama and all the horrible things that are happening in our minds there, we need to remember that there are local pathways to all of that. And I want to say that because you are competing in this space, limited space of journalism and newspapers, you are competing with all the people who are wanting to talk about, right now it's Trump, want to talk about Trump. They want to talk about all of these things. And you are not going to rise above that noise to be heard. But where you will be heard is locally. You will be heard at your city board meetings, your metro council meetings, your board of education meetings. You will be heard if you talk about your representatives. Well, I don't know if Mitch McConnell's hearing anybody right now, but his team will hear if you want to write about Mitch McConnell and what's going on. But you also have to write it in a way that is not regurgitating what everybody else is saying. And that is where your lived experience comes in. That's where mining your life really comes in because you live in this community. You live right here. You vote for these people and you send them to Washington. And it matters. And so when we write about our local communities as well, whether that's our Metro Council, our school board, or what our police department, you also drive solutions more effectively than any national conversation will because we all share the same roads, our kids go to the same schools, we rely on the same emergency infrastructure. All of those things are better served and prove to show more results. And also, there was a study done by Joshua Dar who they took a Palm Springs newspaper and they removed any mention of national politics. I actually did this as the opinion editor at the Courier Journal and people did not like it. I was like, I want to hear local. If you want to read national opinion, you can go to national newspapers. I want to read about what matters here locally. And what they found is when people do that, is that it actually helps heal the community. That divisiveness actually shrinks. It actually gets better because we are working towards solutions on problems that affect all of us. So whether you want to talk about the data centers going in your community or LMPD for us for Louisville, your police department or your school board, really take heart on those local elections. How do they feel about how does how, you know how does your school board members feel about allowing 18-year-olds to carry guns because that's how old their seniors are? How does your Metro Council people care about the data center going in? All of those things matter. So think of in terms of local and why and how that serves all of us. Okay. Now you got to know your reader also. Think of your own reading. Think of your own reading habits. Know your reader. The reason why op-eds are 500 to 800 words is because of this. When you are reading an op-ed, you are looking at your phone while you're waiting for the train or the bus or your latte at Starbucks or in that stinking little doctor's office room and it's taken him 45 minutes to find you. That's when you're reading. You are going to put it down halfway through, most likely when the Starbucks lady calls your name or when the doctor would come calls you back to get your blood drawn, whatever it is. You are going to be interrupted. You are in discovery mode. There's two different kinds of reading. There's lean forward reading and there's lean back reading. Lean back reading is when you pick up a book and you decide to sit down with your cup of tea or cup of coffee and enjoy it. When you lean forward, you're on the internet. You're pouring through the newspaper or pouring over whatever internet substacks or whatever that you go through, and you're discovering. You're looking for what piques your interest, and that's where your op-ed is going to pop up. So know your reader, respect their time, and get to your point by opening with your strong opinion, your narrative, digress into data. That way, if they put it down, if all read is the first paragraph, then they know how you feel and they know your personal connection to it. So at least it leaves them with an emotion. And then after they get their latte and sit down, they might want to come back and read the rest of it. But if you don't hook them in that first paragraph, then you're gone. Once this guy's train shows up, he's putting his phone in his pocket, getting in the train safely, getting settled in, and he's going to open his phone back up. Is he going to want to keep reading or is he going to swipe up to the next thing? So be aware of your own reading habits. Understand where you start to drop off, and then you'll be able to really look at your own writing within those terms. There's one question. Now we're gonna pivot a little bit to what editors are looking for because they're looking for what the reader looks for, but there's a couple specific things that the editor is gonna want to know from you and from your writing. Why now? Does your column have a news peg? Why do we care about this right now? If something happened in the news, That's great, but you got to be quick. You can't just wait. If you wait 3 to 5 days after something happens in the news, they've already moved on to the next thing. You know, we've got a short attention span when it comes to this. And opinion editors, when something pops in the news, they are looking for those reactions right now. Now, if it's something like Mitch McConnell and nobody knows where he is, it's like a Where's Waldo out there with him right now. They're going to go to their public officials. They're going to go to Andy Bashir. They're not looking necessarily. I mean, they could. Your opinion could absolutely be something different and savvy, and they might want that. But here in Louisville, the example I love to use is when Scotty Scheffler got arrested. Scotty Scheffler was a golfer. If you're not in Louisville and you don't know him, he was a golfer and they did a PGA tour event here. I am not a golfer, so I'm not going to use the right jargon. And he was arrested by LMPD. People were saying he ran over a cop, he dragged a cop, all of these things, trying to get to the golf course. When that happened, the internet exploded. That was something local that actually had a national relevance and tie. And it was also LMPD, the murderers of Breonna Taylor. And so a lot of these things were popping. I go to my inbox and I'm looking. I am looking for any subject line that says golfer, Scotty Scheffler, LMPD at it again, anything that tells me that somebody wants to talk about this. And then I took to social media and I looked for those little one-off rants and things. And then I would, and if there was somebody I knew who could write, I reached out to them and said, "Hey, do you want to write something? And I need it now." Because that's what we're up against. The news media is competing with Google and social media, and they shouldn't be. They should have a different model, but there are entire teams, or at least there was when I left in 2024, there was an entire team dedicated to following Google Trends and then writing news stories according to what was trending, just because the return on investment for those clicks made advertisers happy. And so you really do need to think about that. Metrics matter, and so if something pops, they want it right now. So that's why I said it's good to keep a journal, write down those things, or really be intuitive about if you have a visceral reaction to the news, why is that, and start to really write that out and flesh that out. So why now? You want that right now, and the editors want to know why now. Now, if you don't have a why now and you consider your topic an evergreen, there is news for you. There are some sweet spots. You can tell them in Louisville because it says between Derby and back to school. If you're not in Louisville, think Mother's Day. Between Mother's Day, Derby, and back to school, you have a lull in the news. We're not really thinking the primaries are over. We're not really thinking about anything except if something happens, like Mitch McConnell disappearing for a month. That has a quiet, there's a reason why Shark Week exists. It's not because sharks are inherently more dangerous than they ever have before. It's just because summer is when the news is slow. So now, if you have an evergreen, a nice essay, something that's topical but maybe not timely, then now's a good time before back to school starts in August. And then again, Thanksgiving and New Year. The elections are over, but the new legislative session doesn't start again until January. Everybody's got holidays on the mind. Some of the most poignant essays I've published have been holiday essays. There's one in particular that comes to mind. There was a college student who wrote about how the holidays always meant for her that she was going to be alone. And not because she wasn't loved or didn't have family around her, it was just because her mom was a single mom who worked the kind of job that she got extra shifts during the holidays, which meant extra money during the holidays. And they were in a socioeconomic status that really mattered. So mom worked Christmas, mom worked Thanksgiving, mom worked all of those big holidays because it meant more money for the family. And she hung out by herself. And it was so well received. USA Today picked it up. That's one thing that'll happen if you write for a column for a Gannett newspaper. USA Today opinion section monitors all of those essays that are all of those op-eds that are happening network wide. And the ones that do well, they will republish them up on USA Today. So when you have something timely that connects to national or connects to a holiday or time, then there's always that possibility that USA Today will pick it up. And that's good to know. I'll look at my notes. Let's talk about the email you send to the editor. Three things you need to know in your pitch. And by pitch, I mean the first paragraph before you paste your entire draft. So, three things include what you're writing about, why you are the one to write it, and why you want to write it right now, why it's important right now. And then you paste your entire draft in the body of the email. If you have data in there, you are going to link within that body of the email to the source of your data because op-eds are fact checked. If you are writing to an ethical newspaper, they do their fact checking. I spent most of my time fact checking when I went through columns. And then you want to write, yeah, and then put your signature. You want one or two sentences. That's a short bio about yourself. I just write Bonnie Jean Feldkamp as a syndicated columnist. And when my book comes out next year, it'll probably be also include also the editor of Fast Forbidden Women. So think of that, and you can cater your bio according to what you're writing about at that point in time. So I think most of you have found me through my newsletter. But oh, practical tips first. Sorry, I almost skipped a slide. Don't let the hate in. Don't engage in vitriol. Don't and learn from constructive criticism. If you are sensitive to hate, then when your op-ed publishes, you might want to put your social media on private for about a week. It doesn't last much longer than that. Don't engage in the comment section. It helps no one. And you've had 500 to 800 words to say your piece. If somebody has a two-sentence comment that they want to write, let them. And if you don't want to, and don't respond to them, if you don't, if it's something somebody says that I don't, that is not kind or I don't like, then I just let it hang there. I don't engage because trolls feed off of engagement. So if you just leave them hanging, leave them hanging. If it's really disgusting or it's a meme, a lot of times in the comments somebody will put like some just nasty, if it's my page on my public facing Facebook or whatever, they'll put a disgusting meme. I just delete it. I don't say another word. I don't draw attention to it. I just delete it. I'm not here for that. If you can't have, I'm certainly open to a dialogue. It's not going to happen on social media. I've had somebody like write something on LinkedIn and I replied to them, "Hey, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about this, but I'm not going to go back and forth on social media. So feel free to email me." And they don't. They never have. Every once in a while somebody will and I'll have a conversation, but that's it. But I don't engage in that. I put my energy towards better things. Constructive criticism is another thing. I wrote a column for USA Today when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and in that, I wrote, obviously, this was about abortion, but I also wrote about adoption because that always comes into play in the conversation. And the line that I had written was give up for adoption. I had emails immediately saying, it is not give up, it is place for adoption. And I was like, thank you for pointing that out. That's my ignorance, and I apologize. I went to my editor. I said, hey, can we update this to say placed for adoption instead of given up? And can we do it in time for print? And they did. And the reason why it mattered is because I do not want my point to get lost because of my poor choice of words. And if I can learn to say it in a way that's not triggering for someone that it matters to, then I have a much better chance of getting that reaction of, huh, I never thought of it that way before. Don't let people get hung up on words. Really, really choose your words. Every reader brings their own baggage to the page, just like every writer brings their baggage to the page. I'm asking you to mine your lived experience and be cognizant of your gut reactions. Not everybody is capable of doing that. So when you get hate, it's people who have not learned how to understand where their visceral responses come through and how to respond to them appropriately. And that's the big job of humanity right now, I think. And I really hope that I can inspire people to live more that way, which is what this has been about. And I'm very, very thankful and very grateful that you're here. If you're not on my weekly newsletter, please sign up here. And if you are, I'm so grateful that you are, and I'll see you every Friday morning in my inbox.